The bomb had been in Afghanistan since early January. Nicholson signed the final order authorizing the mission just 24 hours before the bomb dropped.
Welcome back, everyone, and we'd like to welcome our viewers here in the U.S. I'm Cyril Vanier in the CNN newsroom. Donald Trump had little to no experience of foreign policy before he took office, but that changed quickly. And Mr. Trump's recent foreign policy moves certainly got the world's attention. The message that Washington is willing to flex its military might. Elise Labott breaks it down for us.
New warnings from China. As tensions rise with North Korea, the Chinese foreign minister warning that if war breaks out, quote, there will be losses on all sides. Russia, Iran, and Syria also issue warnings to the U.S. against new strikes in Syria. The threats follow President Trump's decision to launch 2 major military strikes in Afghanistan and Syria.
We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing. And frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately.
The display of military might, a message to U.S. enemies and their supporters, and what is quickly becoming a hallmark of Trump's emerging foreign policy.
President Trump has given much more leeway to his military commanders to strike, and they're striking. And I think that does send a message around the world that America's back.
Unbelievable.
It's an about-face from the candidate who promised a national security strategy that put America first.
I want to help all of our allies, but we are losing billions and billions of dollars. We cannot be the policeman of the world.
But as commander-in-chief, Trump acknowledged the images of last week's gas attacks in Syria had a deep impact.
I now have responsibility, and I will have that responsibility and carry it very proudly.
In the span of a week, Trump has also changed his mind on the NATO alliance, now viewing it as a tool to counter Russian aggression in Europe.
I said it was obsolete. It's no longer obsolete.
And abandoning his hardline stance on China.
Great relationship.
Now calling President Xi Jinping a partner to counter North Korea's nuclear threats.
President Xi wants to do the right thing. We had a very good bonding. I think we had a very good chemistry together. I think he wants to help us with North Korea.
If a Trump foreign policy is emerging, it would be don't have a doctrine.
I like to think of myself as a very flexible person. I don't have to have one specific way, and if the world changes, I go the same way. I don't change. Well, I do change.
Trump says he trusts his commanders, pressing him to flex U.S. military muscle. In Yemen, where the U.S. is stepping up airstrikes against ISIS, in Iraq and Syria, where Trump has sent hundreds of additional troops to fight ISIS since taking office, and in Afghanistan, where his national security advisor, General H.R. McMaster, is traveling soon to plot the future of the U.S. military presence. Trump now learning to trust the expertise of his generals he once boasted about knowing more than.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
Military experts are pointing to a popular saying in the military: you can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility. And as commander-in-chief, President Trump still owns the consequences of the decisions taken by the military on his behalf. While he may be glad to take credit when the mission is successful, the question is, will he be willing to share accountability when things go wrong, including civilian casualties? Elise Labott, CNN, Washington.
And for more on President Trump's evolving foreign policy, here's CNN political commentator, also the Washington correspondent of the New Yorker magazine, Ryan Lizza. He's in Washington right now. Ryan, what Mr. Trump calls his flexibility, that intellectual and policy flexibility that he actually boasts about on foreign issues, isn't that just code for I'm learning this foreign policy stuff as I go along?
Well, I think you have a good point there. It really is true that on some of the biggest issues, what he said on the campaign trail and what he thought about issues like North Korea and, for instance, what China's influence over North Korea was, right? what he thought about NATO, what he thought about the NAFTA trade agreement, what he thought about Assad, what he thought about Putin. Those are all areas that have, without a doubt, changed in the last 3 months. And so we are seeing someone who's gone from seeing as the world maybe as he wanted it to be, to recognizing the world as it is and adapting accordingly, which is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. It would be far worse if he was stuck in his views that were sort of based on not having a command of the issues. I think for his most ardent supporters, it's got to be a little worrying that he has such flexibility, because you do, at the end of the day, especially his most serious supporters, you want someone with core convictions. But I do think there are some places where, despite the changes, there is a general consistency.
Ultimately, does it make U.S. foreign policy more or less predictable? Because as you pointed out, Mr. Trump, he's shown remarkable willingness to revert to what's fairly traditional U.S. policy. You mentioned the examples of NATO, for instance, or the fate of Bashar al-Assad.
Absolutely. And look, where he is on Syria is exactly where Barack Obama ended on Syria. That is not wanting any major intervention there, saying that Assad has to go, but deterring Assad from using chemical weapons. Now, obviously, Trump went a step further and did used force. But if Obama had been in office later and Assad had used chemical weapons after their agreement, he probably would have done the same thing. On North Korea, he's where Obama ended up, which is, no great options, frankly. I think the big difference and the real break with both Democratic and Republican foreign policy is this. He is a realist. He does not speak in terms of American values, democracy, human rights. And so that is a significant difference with both Obama and George W. Bush, who both talked about their foreign policy despite their differences in terms of American values. For instance, his meetings and the meetings of his aides with Vladimir Putin, the president of China, al-Sisi, the leader of Egypt, in previous administrations, the fraught issue of human rights in those countries, of democracy and the rollback, for instance, of democracy in Egypt and in Russia, the jailing of opponents, those would have been issues on the agenda. That is not something that this administration seems to care about.
All right, CNN political commentator Ryan Lizza on this emerging foreign policy that we're seeing from the new Trump administration. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure.
Large-scale evacuations are currently going on in Syria. Civilians and rebels from several besieged towns are now allowed to leave. Thousands of people from 2 Shiite towns that remained loyal to the government are being sent to Aleppo, and Sunni rebel fighters who've also been under siege are being relocated to Idlib province. Iran brokered that swap with the support of Russia. And in Moscow now, the foreign ministers of Russia, Iran, and Syria met in a show of unity against the U.S. missile strikes. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Washington should have respected Syria's sovereignty instead of undermining, as he puts it, the peace process in Syria. The U.S. military says dropping its most powerful bomb, short of a nuclear weapon, on ISIS was, quote, the right weapon against the right target. It targeted a network of ISIS tunnels in eastern Afghanistan. Afghan officials now say it killed at least 94 militants. CNN's Barbara Starr has more.
The largest conventional bomb ever dropped in combat exploded above a complex of caves and tunnels in a remote area of eastern Afghanistan. The top U.S. commander adamant the mission was only about killing ISIS.
The timing of the use of this weapon was simply the appropriate tactical moment against the proper target to use this particular munition. So it is not related to any outside events.
It does deliver a psychological message to ISIS. One military official tells CNN the massive bomb is powerful enough to destroy 9 city blocks.
It will level that area and provide an unbelievable amount of concussion to that area. So it will collapse caves, it will blow up things, and it will, if you're alive afterwards, you're going to have perforated eardrums and a lot of trauma.
General Nicholson says it all went according to plan. Caves and tunnels destroyed, Afghan officials say dozens of ISIS fighters killed.
We had persistent surveillance over the area before, during, and after the operation, and now we have Afghan and U.S. forces on the site and see no evidence of civilian casualties, nor have there been any reports of civilian casualties.
The bomb had been in Afghanistan since early January. Nicholson signed the final order authorizing the mission just 24 hours before the bomb dropped. Afterwards, local Afghans described the enormity of the blast.
Last night's bomb was really huge. When it dropped, it was shaking everywhere.
A lot of firepower was used, but the estimate is there's still upwards of 800 ISIS fighters inside Afghanistan. Barbara Starr, CNN, the Pentagon.